This is the Reviewing Network Live, a weekly stream of consciousness recording session where I sit back with you folks out there, talk about some of the big news stories from the past week, and some other things I found that might be of amusement to you out there. I think you might get a kick out of it. Now, these are more like audio podcasts and are much longer than my usual videos and are also for the most part unedited and will contain some foul language. So, if you're easily offended by that, I advise you to maybe step back a bit, maybe go somewhere else. But hey, if you're up to the challenge, sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. Thanks. And for the 72nd time ever, we are live. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another thrilling and exciting episode of... What show is this? The Reviewing Network Live. I'm sorry. I was doing my intro like I do the NFL Network intro, and I almost forgot what number this was. But no, this is the 72nd episode. This is the Reviewing Network Live. You heard the intro. You know where you're at right now. So, yeah, spend the next hour with me talking about the big news stories of the week and what little stories there were, because once again, it was a very slow news week, and we do have a couple of things we're talking about here, but the more interesting thing I think is going to be this weekend box office that we're going to delve into right now, because, yeah, the movie that everybody thought, and myself included, was going to be the number one movie did not do that. In fact, it did not do as well as I think the studio wanted to, but we'll eventually get to that in just a little bit here. But we're going to start off, of course, with the weekend box office, and it's very, very interesting. It's a very interesting box office indeed. And it starts right from the get-go with the number 5 film here. Last week's number 1 movie, Den of Thieves 2 Pantera, fell off like a rock. It had the biggest drop-off of all the releases this week, 56% from last week, bringing its 2-week total to... the gross is $6.6 million this weekend. The 2-week gross is $26.2 million. If you take in worldwide, it's up to $32.3 million. I don't even remember what the first movie did. I know the first movie was a surprise hit, was somewhat of a hit, I guess, but the demand I don't think was really there for this movie to really come out. And I'm trying to see what the domestic was for the first one. The first one brought in $44.9 million domestically in the U.S. Where's the second one at here? Yeah, $26.6 million if you include... I don't think you include the World War... No, $26.6 million, about $26.2 million, so it's right at where the first movie it was, and it'll probably end up being at that area too, but I just don't think the demand was there for that movie that the studio really thought that there was. I mean, yeah, you somehow snuck the number 1 movie last week, but you were really the only competition out there. You were only the real new thing out there, and people wanted to see something new, and of course that was a hit, and that first weekend at least. But with all of that said, though, let's move along here, because I've got nothing else to say about this, honestly. But with that said, let's move along to some good stuff here. Number 4 on the list is Sonic the Hedgehog 3, which brought in $8.6 million, only dropping 24% from last week, bringing its 5-week gross up to $216.5 million. It's already well surpassed the last 2 Sonic the Hedgehog movies. It's over $422 million worldwide. Blockbuster hit. What more do you need to say? Really good movie. And now let's get to the fun stuff here, the interesting stuff here that I think we're going to be talking about considerably here. The number 3 movie of the week, and that is Blumhouse's Wolfman. Yeah, the movie that was from the same people that made The Invisible Man, which was the big hit a few years ago, back in February of 2020. One of the last big hits before the pandemic hit. And, everyone was looking forward to seeing what this director could do with the Wolfman. A new Wolfman movie sounded like a really cool idea. I was really looking forward to it. And then we probably should have gotten the indication early on that something ain't right in Denmark when that first costume leaked at the Halloween Horror Nights in August. A lot of us probably looked at that and went like, yeah, we're probably giving this way too much more credit than it needs to, but... At least that's what I think most people were looking at here. But some people were thinking maybe this isn't the Wolfman. Maybe this is the guy that becomes the Wolfman, and the Wolfman they show in the movie is going to be so much better. Well, I saw the movie, and I hate to tell you guys this, but no. No, he does not look better. He actually looks a whole lot worse. I mean, it's amazing that the Halloween Horror Nights Wolfman looked much more like a Wolfman than the actual Wolfman did. This is a film that I talked about in my review. I said that this film doesn't feel like a movie that was made by people who clearly wanted to make a good Wolfman movie. This movie felt like a film that they were trying to make so that people would shut the hell up about how bad the 2010 Benicio del Toro Wolfman looked. Like, this is a Wolfman that looks so terrible that Jacob from Twilight, when he becomes a werewolf, looks much more convincing than this fucker does in this movie. That's how bad you know this movie is. And, yeah, this film underperformed pretty badly. I mean, granted, the budget was not big at all, $25 million, and $10.5 million isn't that bad of an opening for a movie with that small of a budget, but with all that said, though, at the same time, it's just like, you expect so much more because of the name recognition, the Wolfman. You know, Blumhouse is a big name that draws people in, even with the smaller budgeted movies. I mean, this thing was projected to make somewhere between $20 to $25 million from what I saw, and it couldn't even do that. And it's a film that is probably very much going to be heavily front-loaded, especially considering that the cinema score is a C-, and that is not a good sign for a movie. If your movie has a cinema score of less than pretty much an A, it's pretty much dead on arrival. Like, you're not making any money back anytime soon, even with the lack of competition coming up next week. But yeah. This was not a good opening for this movie, and a lot of, expectations were soaring high for this film, and, yeah, it just wasn't there, and the film was a major letdown on a number of different levels, and I was really disappointed by it. There was stuff in it I did like. I liked some of the concepts that they had, but the script was just a mess. I thought most of the characters were pretty bland. The only one you really get behind is Christopher Abbott, and the practical effects can work sometimes. The visuals can look good sometimes, and I like the idea of a slow burn movie centering around this one family being attacked by this Wolfman. That's a fun idea. Just bad execution overall, and the payoff at the end when the Wolfman finally arrives, it just doesn't become worth it in the end. I delve more into this in my review, so if you want to go check that out, I'll leave a link to it. I can't leave a link to it on this channel. It's with the corner, but I'll leave a link to it down below in the comments if you want to go check that out. So, but yeah, this movie Wolfman's pretty much a dead waste. Pretty much not a. What do I want to say about this movie? I want to say it's a flop. It's a flop overall because it's going to make its money back, but it's an underperforming film. It's a film that I think they were expecting so much more from it, and I hope this doesn't deflect from Universal's plan with the monster movies, these smaller budgeted films, because I'm really curious to see what Lee Cronin does with The Mummy coming up next, the guy who did Evil Dead Rise. I hope that doesn't change that whatsoever, and I hope that guy delivers a really good film, but Wolfman was just a major missed opportunity on a number of different levels, So with that said, let's go to the number 2 movie this week. Different kind of beast that took over the box office. Has been taking over ever since the year started. Mufasa: The Lion King, which only dropped 19% from last week, bringing its total this week to $11.5 million. It has crossed the $200 million mark now, $205.8 million after 5 weeks. The worldwide gross closing in on $600 million at $591.998, pretty much $592 million. So, yeah, not quite the hit that the first live-action Lion King was, but for a movie that everyone thought was dead on arrival and wasn't going to make a ton of money back, I mean, it did make its budget back. It is a profitable hit for Disney. I mean, yeah, they probably would have liked to see a number similar to what they had on the first Lion King, but for a movie that everyone thought was dead on arrival, I mean, it's not too far away from where Sonic the Hedgehog is at. Like, it wouldn't surprise me if Sonic the Hedgehog gets surpassed by Mufasa pretty soon, but with all that said, let's get to the biggest surprise of the entire weekend, and that's the number 1 movie here, which is a film that I wasn't even going to go see this weekend. I was kind of curious about it, but after hearing about how negative the buzz on Wolfman was, I figured, you know what? I'll give it a shot. Why not? I was kind of looking forward to checking it out, and I'm kind of glad I did get to see it because it was it was an enjoyable, good time. And the number one movie this week is One of Them Days. Now, this is a film that does not have the big stars, like the big superstars that would guarantee it a number one spot here. I mean, yeah, Keke Palmer is a recognizable star. SZA, of course, is a very recognizable musician and actress. You know, she's been in a lot of stuff. You know, not really a lot of people know who Issa Rae is outside of people who watched Insecure, who's one of the producers on this film, and it's written by one of the people who worked on Insecure. This is directed by Lawrence Lamont, who is making his feature film debut on this. But I mean, the buzz on this was not really that high going into it, and yet it found an audience pretty well. And I mean, it's not by a wide margin by any means necessary. It's literally a $70,000 difference between the number one spot and the number two spot. But for a film that wasn't expected to open that big, it was supposed to open behind The Wolfman. To open where it's at the number one spot this weekend, it's really interesting. I mean, $11.6 million, and it was not a high budgeted film. It was only a $14 million movie, so it's instant profit from this point forward for this film, and it's got an A- on Cinema Score, so it will have a track record going forward. Like it'll stick around at the box office for a while now. And rightfully so, man, because I think it is a really good, fun movie. I had a good time watching this film. I thought it was really clever, really funny stuff. Keke Palmer and SZA work off each other so well. It took me back to like those movies like Friday and Clerks and Harold and Kumar and Dude, Where's My Car, where it's the buddy comedy between these two characters, and you got all this wacky, zany, crazy stuff going on in their lives over the course of this one day here, because the whole purpose of the movie is that, you know, one of their boyfriends blew the rent money and they got to pay back $1,500 before 6:00 or they'll be evicted. And yeah, it all takes place over the course of one day, and it's a really good movie. It's a really funny movie that just works very well, and it was a real good time all across the board. There's a great cast all over the place that makes it worthwhile. It's a really good movie. It's an impressively put together film, a film I had a really good time watching and having a good time laughing at. It's a really good, fun movie, and it's one I highly recommend checking out. And yeah, I'm glad to see it open at number one this weekend, because at least there's a good movie that opened up at number one this weekend. Although it's funny because I'm looking at the results on Box Office Mojo. For the 3-day weekend, it's One of Them Days, but for the 4-day weekend, it's Mufasa the Lion King who has the lead. So just to kind of go quick on that, let's just take a look and see how much of a difference is with the numbers here. I'm looking at this for the first time, and there are certainly some notable differences here. For the Martin Luther King Jr. 4-day weekend, it's Moana 2 that comes back up here and takes the spot where Den of Thieves is at. So Den of Thieves moves down one more spot. That's not a good sign for that movie, but Moana 2, $8.4 million, including the 4-day weekend. $445.1 million. It crossed the $1 billion mark. Yeah, congratulations, everybody. You made this regurgitated piece of garbage that was originally a Disney Plus TV series is a $1 billion success. I hope this planet is proud of that. Just saying. But Sonic the Hedgehog 3 is at 4 with $11 million, $218.8 million. Wolfman, $12 million. One of Them Days up to $14 million. So One of Them Days is already profitable from this point forward. But Mufasa the Lion King brings in $15.5 million, $209.7 million. So definitely a noticeable difference there, and not really that much of a surprise overall, considering that the family films have had no real competition going forward until we get to the end of the month, because Dogman, I think, is going to be the next big movie that will be the number one spot. Flight Risk, maybe. I don't know how big of an audience Flight Risk will have, but it does have a director in Mel Gibson that people do rely on. It has Mark Wahlberg in it. Mark Wahlberg has a reliable name, and there's no other real stiff competition coming up for it, so there might be an opportunity for it to be the number one film. It wouldn't surprise me if Mufasa stuck around, or even One of Them Days, but either way, I think it's going to be a very low box office weekend, and that's kind of what you expect for this time of the year. I mean, you don't get to the big blockbusters until maybe not even Dogman, but Captain America: Brave New World, which will be Valentine's weekend, will probably be the first big blockbuster of the year. No question it'll be the first big blockbuster of the year, but depending on how well it does will be a whole nother story. But so yeah, that's the weekend box office overall. A little bit longer than usual, but then again, with the lack of stories we have this week, can you really blame me? So let's just go ahead and get through some of these stories here. Nothing really that big in terms of news in general, but stuff that I saw that I kind of feel like I have to address some things about them. So let's start with the first story I have here. So, Andy Muschetti, who did The Flash and also did It and It Chapter 2 and is currently working on Batman the Brave and the Bold, went on Variety. He did an interview with them, and he still can't get over the fact that The Flash was a massive flop, even though there are several reasons why that movie was not a hit, and I will get to those in just a little bit here. But, no, here's his reasoning to why The Flash flopped, because according to this article that I have here, he said it wasn't a movie that appealed to the four quadrants. It failed at that. I'm just going to read this article, and then we're going to talk about everything that's wrong with this movie. So, and this excuse for why he thinks this movie failed to make its money back. So, the article starts off with the Flash director Andy Muschetti has his own thoughts as to why the $200 million tentpole was a box office dud. They're asking this in 2025. Who was asking this question, per se? Like, it's been almost 2 years. Just move on, dude. But released in 2023, The Flash grossed $271 million by the end of its run. It's not a small figure by any means, but considering the budget size and projected marketing costs, the DC blockbuster needed to double that figure to get out of the red. Muschetti said the reason The Flash couldn't recoup costs was because it failed to hit all four quadrants of movie-going demographics: men over 25, men under 25, women over 25, women under 25. So basically, everybody on the planet is according to this demographic of theirs, despite Warner Brothers' best efforts. The Flash failed among all the other reasons because it wasn't a movie that appealed to all four quadrants. It failed at that. Muschetti said on Radio 2's La Boyera de Costa show, I think I'm pronouncing that right. When you spend $200 million making a movie, Warner Brothers wants to bring even your grandmother to the theaters. Muschetti went on to say that behind closed doors, he found people don't care about The Flash as much as other beloved DC icons like Batman or Superman. He noted that this is especially true in the women under and over 25 demographics, because clearly The Flash was not a bit. People don't care about The Flash, even though The Flash ran for several seasons on the CW. But fuck that shit. I found in private conversations that a lot of people just don't care about The Flash as a character, particularly the two female quadrants. All of that is just the wind going against the film, I've learned. Outside of box office woes, The Flash was plagued by lengthy delays and off-camera issues with star Ezra Miller. Let's talk about the real reason why this movie bombed, because that's a half-assed answer from somebody who is still talking about this even after all these years later. Why? Who was like, what sadistic person was just like, I want to bring this up here and see what kind of stupid answer this guy's going to give me for this, because this is really a stupid response to this. Like, first off, it's been over 2 years. You've got to let that go. I let that go, and I voted The Flash the worst movie of 2023. Like, I'm over it at this point. But here's the reasons why The Flash was a complete failure. You want to know why The Flash failed? I will tell you personally. The Flash failed because, 1, it was a terrible movie. 2, it was a movie that was more focused on its cameos than actually trying to tell a story. Like, the focal point of the entire movie was the fact that, hey, Michael Keaton is back as Batman. It's the first time we've ever had him back as Batman. Pay no attention to that Batgirl movie we were working on that we've just shelved off to the side. Like, why would you even think that? What the hell's wrong with you? Yes. All they were talking about when this movie was coming out was all the cameos. Like, we're talking about Batman. We're talking about, characters from Man of Steel coming back. We're talking about, bringing in ideas that we had in the past, like Nicolas Cage as Superman. We're going to have all the Superman in here. We're going to have Christopher Reeve with Superman and Helen Slater as Supergirl, with some of the worst, terrible-looking visuals you will ever see in your entire lifetime. But no, it's okay. It's okay, because that leads us to the third reason why this movie failed because the effects were terrible. But don't let anybody fool you. According to the director, they're supposed to look bad. That's the whole point of this. Like, the effects are supposed to look terrible. And I'm sorry, for a $200 million movie, you cannot use that excuse as a reason why your film looks as bad as it is. That just is all that tells you is that you are a person that clearly realizes that you have a misfire here, and you're going to do anything you can to sell this movie like a bad scam artist is. Like, fourth, David Zaslav. What do I need to say about him, David Zaslav? But it's because of him, he had to get all of his buddies from all of his Hollywood buddies together and go watch this version of the film that isn't the final version of it and praise the hell out of it. That's what Tom Cruise, Stephen King, like. I'm guaranteeing you that they don't really feel that way about this movie, and all they is that Warner Brothers probably paid them a shit ton of money and let them do whatever they want to get a good response coming out of this movie. Fifth and most important is fifth. I'll say the most important part for later, but fifth. Nobody's cared about the DCEU anymore. You guys shit the bed on that big time, because by 2022, when this was coming together, it was already too late for you guys, because you had just completely. Nobody had an idea of what the DCEU's future was supposed to be. Dwayne Johnson tried to literally hold it hostage and make Black Adam the future of the DCEU, which backfired horribly. And then it took James Gunn to get it back together again when it was all said and done. The reviews were also terrible for the movie. The reviews on Rotten Tomatoes didn't look that bad. I mean, 67% doesn't look terrible, but keep in mind, Rotten Tomatoes is co-owned by Warner Brothers. You think that Warner Brothers is going to let them get this film a bad review overall? And they used Twitter reviews when they were selling this movie to people, and it's just like a big budget blockbuster movie is using Twitter reviews as the main focal point of the critical responses to this film. Twitter reviews and critical responses are not the same thing. I don't care what anybody says. And let's just go to the biggest elephant in the room about why this movie failed, and that's the whole thing with Ezra Miller. This was a guy that did something absolutely horrible to these people that he was being accused of. Like, if you don't remember the story of Ezra Miller, this was a guy that was known for committing assault. He committed burglary, disorderly conduct, harassment, grooming of minors, and anybody else. Like, this goes to show you why the Me Too movement is such a BS thing, because its intentions are good, but if we're not going to do this to every single person who's done something horribly wrong in their lives, Warner Brothers did everything in their power to make sure that Ezra Miller got off scot-free. And they had to go out there and be like, no, it's okay, guys. He's cool. There's no problems here, man. You're just overthinking things. And it's just like, no, this guy is a fucking monster. And the fact that you're babying him like he did absolutely nothing wrong is complete and utter bullshit. And that's exactly what it is. This whole thing was such a disaster on so many levels, and the fact that they're still the people who made this movie are still talking about it all these years later, as if, how dare you disrespect my magnum opus? Like, if you can't figure out at this point why this was why you're still triggered about this whole thing, you really need to look at your life, man, because seriously, at this point, you gotta move on from that, man. You've got another chance to prove people wrong. They gave you the keys to another DC property with Batman the Brave and the Bold. So, what you should be doing is focusing on making that movie actually good instead of relying on the past, because it makes you look like a pretentious nut job. That's exactly what it does. It makes you look like a nut job because you can't get over the fact that your film failed because it was just a bad idea all across the board. The movie is still terrible. And the movie is still very much terrible. There's no denying that this film still is absolutely horrible. But do you see anybody else from this movie talking about it 2 years later? You see John Francis Daly and Jonathan Goldstein, the writers of this movie, still complaining about why the film failed. You think that Michael Keaton right now is still talking about, man, I can't believe that The Flash didn't do so well. Like he doesn't have other important things in his life that he should be doing right now, other movies that he should be committed to. Like seriously. Like what's the problem here? Like, to me, this just feels like somebody who is so triggered because nobody accepted his grand masterpiece of a movie that he still can't, like, the fact that he still can't get over it, even after all these years later. It's just, it makes him look absolutely obnoxious. It makes him look like an obnoxious prick. I mean, it just makes him look like a complete and utter douchebag by just move on. Just move on with your life and get on with something else, because like you have other things to worry about than this movie failing. Like if you really think that this is your magnum opus, then you're gonna keep forcing everybody to keep talking about it until it becomes a hit again. I'm sorry, man, you've got the wrong idea here what you're trying to do. But yeah, that's my thoughts on that little story here. But he's not the only person who is taking some notable backlash for some things he has done. Let's go ahead and listen to what our good old grandpa Ridley Scott has to say. So Ridley Scott was in the news again this weekend, and not for a good thing. Another thing that makes him kind of look like a dickhead when you really think about it. But, of course, he had Gladiator 2, which, if you saw last week, it was one of my worst movie honorable mentions because, yeah, it proved everything I thought about the movie going into with that. It was a completely pointless sequel that was only made because of name recognition. The only thing that made that movie worth it was Denzel Washington, but that's not enough for me to say that the movie should be watched by any means necessary. And I've had my problems with Ridley Scott in the past because the guy clearly is out of his mind, and people that still defend him but won't defend other directors who are still making quality films even at their old age. It's just it's just really baffling when you listen to some of these people that still defend people like Ridley Scott, who hasn't made a good movie in almost 10 years. The last good movie the guy has made was The Martian. That came out in 2015. That's 10 years from this October. But the reason I'm bringing them up is because Deadline ran a story about his Bee Gees biopic that was working on at Paramount. This is from Deadline Hollywood, and according to the title here, Ridley Scott says Paramount changed the goalpost on my Bee Gees biopic. They didn't like my deal, so I said I'll move on. And the story goes, Ridley Scott is teasing the Bee Gees biopic he's set to direct at Paramount, which has been delayed. The Gladiator 2 director was set to start filming already, but after the studio changed the goalpost, the filmmaker opted to work on another film instead. The studio changed the goalpost, Scott told GQ. I said, you can't do that. They insisted. I said, well, I'm going to warn you, I will walk because I will go on to the next movie. They didn't believe me, and I did. He continued, I will be asked to go too far, and I said, no, next. They didn't like my deal, so I said, I'll move on. I'm expensive, but I'm fucking good. You're expensive, but you haven't been good for a long, long time. That's me saying that. Scott is set to start filming The Dog Stars in April and expects to begin filming the Bee Gees biopic, which is tentatively titled You Should Be Dancing, in September. The filmmaker teased the biopic will revolve around a competition among the band members, saying, I like the working class side of the Bee Gees. It's all about competition with brothers and that they lose Andy. Andy OD'd at 30. It's more about the gift than the luck, right? It's a fantastic story. So let's go back to that part where he says, I'm expensive, but I'm fucking good. Well, you were good back in the old days. Back in the day, this is the thing I have to say about Ridley Scott. I have nothing against the guy as a director overall. He's one of our great directors, but he has not been that great for a long, long time. I mean, this is the guy that directed masterpieces like Alien and Blade Runner, Black Rain, Thelma and Louise. I like this Christopher Columbus movie, 1492, which didn't get the biggest box office overall. There was a lot of flack for G.I. Jane. I don't hate Gladiator. I don't think it's as great as everybody says it is. I don't even think it deserves to win Best Picture, but I still enjoy it. I really like Black Hawk Down. I especially like Matchstick Men. I thought his director's cut of Kingdom of Heaven was pretty good. American Gangster, one of my favorite movies of his. I like Body of Lies. I thought The Martian was really good. But all those other movies he had done that I did not mention, have either been disappointments or just misfires altogether. And most recently, his works just feel like a director that is just struggling to stick around and just stay relevant. But instead, it's just like, we're going to keep, I'm just going to go and keep rehashing the same old junk I've been doing my entire career. Like, oh, I'll do another Alien movie with Alien Covenant, which was absolutely terrible. It was just basically another Alien sequel, and it didn't add anything to it. But everybody else was just like, oh, Ridley Scott's back. Oh my God. Like, you know, The Last Duel was one of those movies that everybody just couldn't stop talking about how great it was. But that movie, but I hated that movie so much. A Me Too movie in medieval times could be good and has a good cast to it, but not the way that Ridley Scott does it. But it tells you so much more when I think House of Gucci is much more fun than The Last Duel was. But it's also not a great movie. But I had more of a good time watching House of Gucci for just some of the over the top performances, especially by Jared Leto. But Lady Gaga was really good in that. I didn't like Napoleon. Everybody else couldn't stop talking about how great that movie was, and just like with Gladiator 2, everybody else couldn't stop talking about how great that movie was. And the problem is that I'm just mostly repeating a lot of stuff I said earlier on another video I did when I talked about George Miller and how he was the anti-Ridley Scott, because George Miller is about as old as Ridley Scott is, but he's a director that just continues to impress with every movie he puts out. I mean, Furiosa, a Mad Max saga, was great. A great movie from last year that did not get the proper respect from most people. It crashed and burned at the box office, but it was a great movie, one that I really liked a lot. I've liked a lot of his last couple movies. I liked 3,000 Years of Longing. I liked Fury Road. I liked what he did with the Babe movies, Happy Feet. You know, the guy very rarely misses on a number of movies. And George Miller is a guy who's almost as old, who's older than Ridley Scott is. Ridley Scott, I think, is 77. Right? Is it 77? Wait a minute, that doesn't seem right, because George Miller is 79. I thought I could... Maybe I got my numbers mixed up here. Ridley Scott was born in 1937, so he's 87 years old. Like, 87 to 79, I'm going to go with the guy who's 79 years old and still knows what the hell he's doing. Ridley Scott was a great director in the past, but his time has come and gone. And I'm sorry that nobody wants to hear that, but it is what it is. The guy's just not that good of a director anymore, and he's not the top shit he is anymore. Like, he's not a guy like Steven Spielberg who still can make great movies at his old age. He's not Martin Scorsese. He's not Clint Eastwood. You know, he's not like these other directors who are still making quality works even after all these years. Ridley Scott has just been a shell of himself for a long period of time, and like, I'm still kind of curious about his Bee Gees film, but the fact that he's gonna act like he's the tough shit. Like, I'm sorry, I just don't see it, man. I just don't see that with him. And I'm going to be one of those few people that says it, but I'm sorry. Ridley Scott, I think, is more overrated nowadays with the stuff that he's done. But I'm still a fan of what he did back in the past. I mean, this is the guy that redefined science fiction and horror with his movies that he made. And he's still a reliable director. He was still a reliable director back then, but not now. Like, he's a director that's just on fumes, and it just seems like he is really just struggling to keep up with the rest of the world. And yeah, I feel bad saying this about him, but that's just how I feel. The guy has not made a quality film in nearly 10 years at this point. And the fact that he still has this ego about him, it's just not worth it, man. Like, it's just not really worth going on. It's just not really worth it. I mean, that's just all I got to say about it, man. Like I said, I've delved more into this more in detail in other videos on other channels, so we're going to go see what I said about Ridley Scott. Check out my video about George Miller, the anti-Ridley Scott, over on the other channel. I'll leave a link to it down below in the description below as well. So with all that said, let's go ahead and move on to our last story here, and that's saying goodbye to a legend in filmmaking. And that is saying goodbye to the legend that is David Lynch, who passed away sadly on Wednesday at the age of 78 years old. David Lynch, what did he exactly die of? As he passed away, this was something that he had been kind of like, he'd been dealing with for a while now. He was suffering from emphysema due to his years of smoking and had been housebound due to his health risks. And he was talking about how he was reliant for a long time on supplement oxygen for most daily activities, saying at one point that he could hardly walk across the room. And so and it also ties into what's been going on with the wildfires in California. He actually had to be evacuated from his home because of that, and those events preceded a terminal decline in his health, and he ended up dying at his daughter's house 5 days short of his 79th birthday. And it doesn't say exactly what caused his death, but yeah, just all that stuff that just really, like, you know, you're a lifelong smoker, you're already dealing with emphysema and all that, and then you have this massive fire that happens in California, and you have to leave your home, and it's already putting you in a place where you don't feel like your usual self. And you know, that's just tough, man. Like, the fact that you had to leave your home, and that's the last time you're ever going to see it because now you're dead. But David Lynch was one of those incredible directors that, you know, everyone knows him for his very stylistic way of making movies and TV shows, and mostly with a surrealist attitude towards it. He received a ton of numerous accolades. He won an honorary Oscar back in 2019, which I always kind of consider the honorary Oscar as like the participation trophy award, because he never won an actual Oscar before, but at least he has an Oscar overall. But he also received a Golden Lion for Lifetime Achievement at the Venice Film Festival in 2006. And this was a guy that, you know, he created these very weird, very surrealist movies and shows that were so bizarre at the time, but they have just held up with the test of time, and have since become the classics that we still know him as today. I mean, everyone remembers. His film goers everywhere remember classics like Eraserhead, you know, The Elephant Man, of course, which was kind of everyone's first real mainstream attention to David Lynch as a whole. You know, directing a film where you have people like John Hurt as the Elephant Man, Anthony Hopkins. That was actually the first Mel Brooks produced film of his. Actually, no, it was the second one, because he had just started. Mel Brooks had started his production company that same year. But there was another movie he did with Dom DeLuise that was the first one for that. But you know, The Elephant Man was a big, successful film, a really impressive and just depressing film that just works on so many levels. You know, it's about this severely deformed man who lives in London in the late 19th century, and they call him the Elephant Man because he has this weird deformity. And, you know, he has that big line in the movie where everyone just looks at him and just, they're just so terrified and just want to follow him. And then he's get cornered and he's just like, I am not an animal, I am a human being. Like, probably a much better acting job than I did, but it's a great movie. John Hurt's very good in the film. Everybody in that movie works so well. It's a really good movie, and one definitely that you should definitely check out. But it's a number of really great films that Lynch did. Like Eraserhead is a very cool, stylistic looking film. Blue Velvet is a really good movie. Wild at Heart with Nicolas Cage and Laura Dern. Mulholland Drive, you know, the worst thing I think he did as a director maybe was Doom, which was the 84 Doom, which definitely didn't work because it was a film that was a little too stylistic in way too many ways, shapes, and form. And luckily, the Denis Villeneuve films have shown what a truly good Dune film can turn out to be with the films that Denis Villeneuve has done. But he did this great movie, The Straight Story with Richard Farnsworth, which is a great example of a slow burn movie where, you know, the course of the movie is just watching this guy played by Richard Farnsworth just riding his tractor all across America, coming across all these characters, and going to meet his estranged brother, who you know, he meets up with, and it just leads into, it's just a really great movie. It's one of those examples of a movie where, you know, it's not about not about the destination, it's about the journey you take. And this is a great movie that really does show that. It was probably the most mainstream film that David Lynch had done after that point. It was a really good movie. It was an incredibly put together film, a very impressive looking film a very impressive film acting wise, with Richard Farnsworth stealing the show. But the ending of the movie, I think, is what makes it a true masterpiece, and one that definitely deserves to be seen. It's definitely one of his more underrated movies that one should be definitely checked out. And of course, you can't talk about David Lynch without talking about his great work with Twin Peaks, a very ahead of its time TV show that first season is definitely the best one, and they've done several attempts to try to give the show a proper conclusion. They did the Fire Walk with Me prequel, which was pretty good, and then the third season, which I think does a better job than the second season did. But Twin Peaks was a really good show. But a lot of people in my age group probably grew up with him more from, of all things, his work with Seth MacFarlane. I mean, the fact that this guy he did is that this director David Lynch and Seth MacFarlane were able to come together and say, "Hey, David, I've got a project here that I'm working on, the Cleveland show, and I need a bartender. Do you want to take this role for me?" And he was like, "Yeah, sure, okay, I'll do it." And lo and behold, David, his role on the show was actually really, really good. Really, really fun overall. Like, it's basically David Lynch playing David Lynch, but it works very well.
What a tough act to follow, huh? Boy, I wouldn't want to follow them. Following them...
You're writing your report on Gus?
He's a very accomplished bartender and filmmaker.
So, Cleveland and Lester, how does it feel to have your son and wife be the laughing stock of our town?
Shut up, Eraserhead.
Oh, no, that's an ear.
My new exercise video.
Oh.
Run faster! You don't want me to catch you! Thanks for coming to Gustavo's, Donna. Welcome to the broken stool, Donna.
Sorry, Gus. No time for your weirdness.
Make time!
Donna!
Let's get this tax-deductible party started.
Yeah, it's literally him just playing David Lynch, and you see all the references to his works in the past, and yeah, on another show with another person behind it, it probably would have been the most ridiculous. This is the worst thing about the show in general, but David Lynch just has this I don't give a fuck mentality to it. Like, he even showed up on Family Guy for a cutaway gag. This was really good too. How David Lynch Stole Christmas. This was great.
We now return to How David Lynch Stole Christmas.
Hello, I got you a present. It's a thumb. Don't look away. Let the fear wash over you.
I don't understand.
That's the whole point. Now, did you leave a plate of black coffee out for me?
No?
In the future, please leave a plate of black coffee out for me. Also in the past.
Like, I love how Seth MacFarlane basically just said to David Lynch, "Just be you," and Lynch was just like, "Okay, I got it." And the funniest thing about this is that Gravity Falls is one of my favorite TV shows, and it's fitting because it is pretty much the Disney's version of Twin Peaks. I mean, it's literally a kid version of Twin Peaks when you really think about it. They were willing to. Apparently Alex Hirsch really wanted David Lynch to star as Bill Cipher on Gravity Falls. I didn't know about this for the longest time, and yeah, it would have been fun to see what he could do as the voice of Bill Cipher, because Bill Cipher is one of those great villains from Gravity Falls, and just like having him as the voice of Bill Cipher would have been very, very interesting. But I don't know, like the fact that Alex Hirsch does the voice of him, like that I think it just works a whole lot better. I mean, you can't tell me that this sounds a lot better than hearing David Lynch do the voice of Bill Cipher.
Boy, these arms are durable. How can you stop me? If you don't exist.
Be honest with yourself. Would you rather have David Lynch doing that voice, or would you rather have Alex Hirsch doing that voice? I mean, I think the Alex Hirsch voice is so much better. I think that's so much of a better voice for Bill Cipher than it is for David Lynch. I mean, that's just my personal opinion on that. But regardless, whatever you think of that, David Lynch was one of those great directors that really it's so sad to see him not in this world anymore. And yeah, he hadn't been making movies for a while now, but just his presence on screen was just such a delight to see. And I was really hoping we'd see more stuff from him. The last thing I think I saw him in was in The Fabelmans, which a great Steven Spielberg movie. If you have not seen The Fabelmans, see that movie. It was one movie that should definitely be seen. If you're going to watch any of Steven Spielberg's more recent films, that's the one you got to watch. That's one of my favorite That's one of my favorite movies of the decade so far. Hit that and West Side Story, proving that, hey, we were talking about Ridley Scott before and how he hasn't done much since then. Look at what Steven Spielberg's done since in this decade so far. West Side Story and The Fabelmans. But that's another person altogether. We're here to talk about David Lynch, who's such a stylistic, visually impressive filmmaker who's made a lot of great stuff that we still watch to this day and are still very, very confused by. It's a lot of his style has been parodied several times on on Family Guy, The Simpsons, Scooby-Doo has done parodies of David Lynch's work. I mean, that's how you know that you've had a lasting legacy, when so many people have been doing your work and making fun of it for so many years now. And it's just such a sad thing to see him go away, unfortunately. So rest in peace, David Lynch. We hope you're up there, coming up with more crazy fucked up shit for heaven and everyone else beyond, because wherever you are right now. But yeah, rest in peace, David Lynch. So with all of that said, let's go ahead and do our recommendations, and I'll get the heck on out of here. So in terms of recommendations this week, there is a lot of stuff coming out this week. Some new stuff, some catalog titles, all of which are stuff that you should definitely check out here. First off, I'll say, here comes out on Blu-ray this week, the latest Robert Zemeckis film with Tom Hanks and Robert Wright Penn, and it's written by the same person who did Forrest Gump, so it's kind of a Forrest Gump reunion. And I'm only saying to watch this movie, not because of the movie itself, which is just pretty bland overall, but my God, I talked about it in my worst movies of the year list last week. This is a film that is so bad it's good. Like, this is a film that has some of the most ridiculous but ridiculously over the top but hilarious moments in it. Like, I talked about that one scene where, the main character of the movie, played by Tom Hanks, like, we see him as a kid, and we see his parents, they're trying to take a picture for Christmas, and they have this kid, and they've had this baby since then, and the parents are trying to tell the kids, to take the picture, and, he's playing around and all that type of stuff. He's got the baby sitting on the chair. They're getting ready to take the picture, and, the kid, the Tom Hanks kid, he finally is just like, okay, I'll sit down, and then he just smacks his baby sister to the ground, and the way she falls, it just reminds me so much of, like, the Family Guy, whenever you see the drunk people just fall completely on the floor. Like, it feels like that type of comedy. Like, it's supposed to be a comedy, but I was laughing my ass off watching this, because it happens all across the movie. Like, I'm only saying watching the movie here because you'll have a good time laughing your ass off at how stupid it is. But also coming out this week, The Substance, which is the movie with Demi Moore, Margot Qualley, and Dennis Quaid. Could get Demi Moore an Academy Award nomination this week, so we'll see what happens there. Smile 2 comes out this week, a movie I'm definitely curious to check out since I really like the first Smile. Last Voyage of the Demeter, the Shout Factory is giving us a brand new pristine 4K version, so I'm definitely looking forward to checking that out. I really like that movie that came out a couple years ago. There's new 4K versions of Kill Bill, Volumes 1 and 2, and Jackie Brown coming out. Jackie Brown's one of my favorite Quentin Tarantino movies, very high up there with Pulp Fiction. Like I've said, it goes back and forth between those two films. Reservoir Dogs is getting a nice-looking steelbook as well. So there is a lot of good stuff coming out. The Grifters, a great movie directed by Stephen Frears with John Cusack and Angelica Houston in it, getting a nice Criterion Collection released. Yeah, a lot of really good stuff coming out this week. So it should be a very fun week in terms of pickups this week for new physical media releases. So those are my recommendations for the week. But with all of that said, thank you guys so much for watching and listening to this. I hope you enjoyed this. I have a good time making these videos, of course. And with all that said, thank you so much for watching and listening. If you like what you saw and you want to see more videos, check out the last episode I did. Check out the playlist as well. Hit the like button, subscribe button, notification button, and all that good stuff. Thank you guys so much for watching and listening. I'll see you guys next time. Thanks for watching, and until next time I see you, we are out.